storyboard or plots things out. And we have three really amazing photographers and filmmakers in three different worlds here, where we have someone who gets into the directing side of things, doesn't operate the camera, someone who's a journalist that does both the still photography and video and puts those together in multimedia pieces, and then someone who is a phenomenal music photographer. So let's start. They're all Nikon ambassadors. Let me introduce the Nikon stage, Mr. Corey Rich.
Thank you.
Rock climber, filmmaker, photographer, a little bit of everything, but mainly does filmmaking now and directing.
Thanks, Mike.
This lady has warmed my heart. I'm great friends with her and her husband, Kurt. She is the co-founder of Think Tank Bag. She is a Pulitzer Prize-winning photographer. She's one of the most incredible talents in the business. Ladies and gentlemen, Deanne Fitzmaurice.
Thank you.
I'm not worthy. I'm not worthy. And then this last cat, this guy I met years ago. Actually, one of our Pro Markets reps, Scott Diusa, met this guy, and they immediately connected with their love of music and video. His name is Chris Hershman. He's one of the coolest video people in the business, shoots music videos, filmmaker Chris Hershman.
What's happening, Mike? Thanks. Appreciate it.
So right out of the gate, I'm going to ask you guys to carry me here because I know enough about video to be dangerous. And like I said, I don't think of the world the way most of you guys do. I'm a moment guy, and if you guys want to stick around for my program after Jen Rosenbaum later, I'll show you some of the music photography and stuff I do on drums with drummers and stills. But to get things going, I want to have the opportunity for you guys to each explain to the audience who you are. I know you guys have some sizzle reels that you can talk about. Give us a good, healthy background of what it is you do.
Sure, sure. I mean, I assume there's a lot of folks in this audience, and I think for the three of us up here, there's a lot of parallels. I fell in love with photography when I was a kid. You kind of get bit by that bug, and spent the better part of half of my career taking pictures. And I really loved, beyond just making individual, beautiful still images, I liked telling stories. I wanted to go back. I started taking pictures when I was 13, and I would go back to the school playground to show my buddies my rock climbing adventures, and photographs helped tell those stories. And then I started building slideshows where I'd try to synchronize slide projectors with carousels, and that never worked. I'm dating myself. But it also never worked. Like the slide carousels, they were never in sync, and the music didn't work, and it was complicated. And then finally, Nikon released the Nikon D90, which was the first video-enabled DSLR camera. And there was this button for taking photos, releasing the shutter, and then there was a button in the back, I think it was on the back, that was to record video. And for the first time, there was a camera that was the form factor that I knew, a DSLR, where I understood aperture and I understood shutter speed, and I knew how to handle it, and I could control the look and feel of the imagery. And it recorded video. It was, of course, just HD video at the time. And that moment, the first time I depressed the video record button on the Nikon D90, completely transformed my career. I went from being a storyteller using still photography to a storyteller that had at my disposal both still photographs and video. And gosh, and it's really hard now. That was probably 10 years ago, and my entire career is flipped upside down. I've always loved being outside. I'm an adventurer. I'm an adventurer by heart. Grew up shooting rock climbing. And now the majority of my work is actually in the video world. I'm probably 80% video and 20% still photography. My projects scale from kind of small footprint production, meaning me or myself and two other people, to pretty large scale, 80+ people on a set with lots of cameras and crews and unions. And I never envisioned that picking up a still camera and falling in love with still photography would lead to being in the video world. And so why don't I'm going to show what we call a reel, and it's just a taste of the type of work that I like to do. So most of this is shot on DSLR cameras or Nikon cameras. And here we go.
over. It's fucking over and I.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks.
I got to tell you, that was pretty damn surreal because I felt like I was part of a Corey video as I'm floating in here, and the beat is vibrating through my chair, and I feel like we've been all in that one of Corey's productions. That's pretty fascinating. That's pretty amazing. Thank you, Corey. Deanne, you come from a totally different place, and that's what I love about the dynamics of this this panel. You have been a journalist your entire career, a photojournalist your entire career. Please tell everybody your background and show the work, a sample of the work that you've done.
Yes, so there are a lot of parallels between us, but there's also a lot of differences because as a photojournalist, I come at my photography storytelling very unscripted, unplanned, and I just let the story unfold. So it's a really different way of thinking.
A lot less scripted. What made you get into photography, and then how did that swing into multimedia? Was it the change in technologies? As Corey said, the D90 that had video capabilities. Talk about your career as a journalist, where you started, and how you rolled into video becoming a part of your world.
Yeah, well, for a long time, I was a staff photographer at the San Francisco Chronicle. And, you know, photojournalism, I learned pretty much on the streets about the ethics of photojournalism and how you want to have the authenticity of what is happening in front of you.
Right.
And so you want to become invisible and just let these moments unfold and capture them to tell someone's story. Mm-hmm. So, you know, I was doing that over the years, and it's all about storytelling. But I found out that doing video storytelling, I could add so much more depth and nuance. And there are some stories that just beg to be told as a video story. Right. You just need the audio.
I was going to say, because you for years had to tell a story with a single image or a series of images in an essay. I can imagine that video now gives you a bit more of an opportunity to tell a greater story.
Yeah, it really does. So now that I'm doing filmmaking, I'm doing a lot of the same things. I am trying to become invisible. It's all unscripted. The moments are unfolding. And one thing I really love are capturing those unpredictable moments, the surprises that happen. So I realized that what I was doing is, there's actually a name for it. And it's, I learned that in the 50s and 60s, there was this movement of these rebel photojournalists. And of course, you know, leave it to the French to come up with this great sounding name, cinema verite. Mm. And so I started, you know, reading up on that and looking at some of the films, and they were approaching it this same way of authentic moments unfolding, unscripted. The camera becomes invisible to the subject and to the viewer. Mm-hmm. And so it's the same way that I've been working as a photojournalist all these years, right, but with motion. So, yes, so I've just been tackling it in this direction, really working as a photojournalist, but with motion. It's like a photo essay in motion.
So you have a clip that you're about to show us. Give everybody a little insight into the clip, and then let's run it.
Yes, so I got my hands on a Z7 before the cameras were launched.
And what we did was we actually assigned you to do a still shoot with the Z7, right? And go back to what you just said about some stories scream video. What happened there?
Oh yeah, that was great. So, so off I went to go do this story in stills, and I was a little bit into it, like a day or two into it, and I said, you know, I've got to do this story as video. It's about a musician. I went on the road with a musician, and that's the piece that I'll show you. So I get on the phone to call Mike. You know, I just go and grab my phone to beg to be able to switch my project to a video project.
So she's sitting there thinking that. We were talking internally at Nikon saying, we really need her to shoot video, not still. How do we approach her and say, can you shift gears? So within the same moment we crossed paths, I called you and said, would you make this into a video project?
Yeah, exactly.
And that's where we landed.
But you know, that moment there, it was serendipity.
Right.
And I think when you're working in this flow with projects that, you know, you're just working on the right project, those moments happen. And those are the kind of moments that I look for in my photography and in my filmmaking, serendipity. And that was a beautiful moment.
So what are we going to see here?
Yes, so this is a short film that I made about a band, Ron Artis and the Truth. He grew up in Hawaii, one of 11 kids. He's the oldest son, and they had a family band. So they had, 11 kids, and they played music. So now he has his own band, and he travels on the road with his wife and his 2 little kids, and his brother plays drums and sometimes stands in. So I just thought it would be a good story. So I went on the road with them. So I'll show you
2
a
clicks,
little bit
I think it's going to be. So one to get past.
So I'm going to show you some stills because that's how I started the project, and then it evolved into video.
It's going to go right to the video.
I believe we're all souls with a body, not bodies with a soul. And I ask myself, what is it we couldn't learn is just a soul?
Searching for answers. I can't lie. This is what I'm fighting for. Searching for answers.
Daddy, come on, Daddy, come on, Daddy, come on.
See. Is this what I'm bugging for? But sometimes I try and see the light, digging deep inside my soul. I cannot go just round this wasted time, talking about what he said or she said. Wow, it feels so crazy just to give it all gone. You gotta learn to live, see. Digging deep, your heart, sing about it.
I wrote this song about 7 years ago, about the love of my life.
Julia.
She's my everything.
I look at her and I just think,
The song I never thought I'd sing.
wow.
Smiles brighter than the sun above, and I'll always call her mine.
I just trust her, and I love her, and I adore her, and I'm grateful for having her in my life and being a part of her life. And
Oh, yes, I'm gone. Not like the wind, but I'm gone. Everyone say you, singing about my Julia. Oh, yes, I'm in love.
That's beautiful. I can see that a 1,000 times and still feel that same emotion.
Exactly.
It's that video booth over there, and how you just creatively you look at that motion. You have the motion at the right time, the techniques of slow motion, but then when you nail that still, it like stops me on a dime. I mean, I think personally for me, I'm always captivated by that still moment and what that moment screams. But you did such a great job of combining the two. And we're going to come back to this a little bit. Chris, tell everybody a little bit about you. You're up next. You can punch the button once so your name comes up, which is a good thing. And talk to us a little bit about who you are.
There I am. Hi, I'm Chris Hershman. I'm from Chicago. Been a Nikon ambassador for a few months now, which is exciting because I kind of grew up with Nikon in my house. It was something that my dad shot. He brought home some brochures, and we went to the local camera store and picked up, my first Nikon. So I was a photographer, and I think a common story here is that there's a lot of photographers transferring into video. I always had an interest for music and photography, and I didn't really have a direction of where I wanted to go in life when I came out of high school. I just knew that I was artistic, I was musical, and I was someone who got into a lot of trouble. I got into trouble because I was brave and I'm bold and courageous, and I would just go up to strangers, and I had no problem talking with people, and so I wanted to become a professional photographer and quit my job at a music store and really pursue it full time. So I went and bought the D300S, which was one of the first models, among the first that had video in it. And I wanted to test the video features out on my buddy's friend. And since I worked at a music store, it was super easy to, grab a band, get my camera, find a show, and shoot them, right? That's probably one of the most basic, easiest ways to test out a camera. So I asked my buddies if I could film them, and I went around the venue, and for one show, I just shot every angle I possibly could in this venue, clipped it together, and then that was my first music video. And once that happened, I was addicted to it, and I wanted to, I just felt like it was an adult, art project for me. Every time I pick up a camera and do some work, it just feels like this fun art project. It never really feels like work. So what I've tried to do with my career is focus on helping musicians,
right.
Because I was a musician, I was in a band, and that's how a lot of this kicked off for me. And working with Nikon is I was using my camera to promote my band,
right.
And we would find cool new ways. And with social media and all different outlets now for video content to live, it proved to be something that was very in demand. And when I started years ago, it just grew, and I continued to stay with Nikon. And as their video features grew, I grew as a filmmaker. So I feel like we've been growing together with video, and we're at a really excellent place right now with the Z series, which I'm really excited to show you some of what we've shot in the past 12 months on the Z. And I believe there's a few DA50 clips in here, but I'd like to show the reel.
You used to shoot a lot of bands in the store, though, right? A band would come in, you do a small little footprint, maybe a camera or two, and you seem to have evolved into a much bigger production going both ways.
It's probably a good segue, yeah. I was just a one-man show for a long time, and then I realized that I had most of the direction of what I wanted, and I needed more people to help me create that vision. So it is kind of blown up to be not a very small production. The latest video that I'm premiering during my presentation later is all me, no big production, and it's on the Z. But a lot of the clips you'll see right now is big production, and I learned how to work with people, to collaborate, and put a vision out there, and everyone come together and put it together. And that's what I love. So I'm going to show you a little bit of what we've been doing over the past 12 months.
2 clicks and you should be good. I got to tell you, I think one of the stumbling blocks for me, yes,
Thank you.
Is I'm a moments person. So I can't think of the totality of having to piece this all together. Chris, talk a little bit more about how you have this vision. You see a band, you see a song, you do a music video, because that is what Chris is specializing in. How do you piece that together? How do you put this all together to try to come up with a vision and know exactly what you need to do?
Yeah, I think for me, I'm pretty strong with my vision and my opinion about that vision. And so sometimes it's an opportunity for you to not necessarily follow the story of whatever the song is. I may have an interpretation visually of what it means to me and a feeling. So when I am approached by someone to make a music video, I'll close my eyes, I'll listen to it a lot, and I don't put limits on what it is. I try not to put limits on my work or my thoughts and how big I can go. And you can see a lot of it's very colorful. It's not necessarily like a band on a stage. It's an imagination. You know, it's an idea, and you work with a crew of people to pull it off. If you're passionate about that's the look I want, you know, and so that's kind of the driving force that led to a lot of the different looks that I have.
So it must be cool to have that song. But Corey, a lot of times you have a company will call you, big companies, and they give you this blank sheet of paper with a concept. You have to build it from there. Where do you start, and how do you take it forward?
Yeah, you know, one of the things Chris just said, and I think this is an important, I try to remind myself of this constantly. We always go in with a preconceived idea. What are we trying to accomplish? But it's important, even for the biggest companies in the world, you go in with a preconceived idea, but your mind, there should always be this like 10% opening in your head for unexpected things happen that you need to be willing to sort of acknowledge. I had this idea, we've put a ton of planning into this, but this is so much better, and you capture the so much better, and then we go back to capture what we had preconceived, because of course you need to come back with that. I mean, in the big commercial world, in the world where it's no longer just you and your buddy shooting, or it's, I shouldn't even say it that way. The larger the project gets, as you would imagine, the higher the stakes. And there are more sign-offs along the way. In the kind of build-up to shooting that project, folks want to make certain that the direction you're going, because a lot of money is going to get spent, everyone's in agreement. And so we'll oftentimes start with, we call it development, story development. We'll sit and brainstorm, and we'll use a whiteboard, and we'll spitball. We'll come up with ideas. We'll put that on a whiteboard. Eventually, we put that into a written treatment is the language that we use. So I spend a lot of time writing and trying to come up with how do I describe what is this going to look like? What's it going to feel like? What's the beginning? What's the middle? What's the end? How's this narrative going to unfold? And oftentimes, we'll even use storyboards. I mean, depending on who you're working with, some people can visualize what you're talking about through words, and some people need to see either key frames. And when I say a storyboard, for those that don't know what I'm describing, it's literally a sketch, a black and white or sometimes very elaborate color sketches of what's going to happen in this first scene, what's going to happen in the second scene. And sometimes we'll even, if it needs to be very detailed, the larger the production gets. Hollywood films, for example, every shot is storyboarded because big crews need to understand where's the camera position, what elevation, how is it being lit, what's the talent doing. And so depending on the scale of the production, it's anything from a one-sheet treatment where we're all on the same page about a written description of what we're trying to accomplish, all the way up to a book of storyboards where we're flipping through and checking off. We just did shot 27A, and then now we're going to do 27B, and you're going through the checklist. And I think, it's flexing different parts of your brain. I think Chris kind of alluded to that. The more complex the shoot gets, an enormous amount of thought goes into the project, the pre-production, really thinking through what's the creative, how are we going to execute this creative, and then you roll that into the field, and your job as a director becomes, how do you communicate that to everyone that's on the job? Right. And I think a really tangible way that you can apply that to whatever it is you're shooting, it's, I say a pre-production meeting, that could be a phone call with the person that you're about to work with, your assistant that's going to go out and help lug your tripod around, or that second camera that they're going to operate. It's a lesson that I learned as a still photographer, that communicating, clear communication with the people you're working with and your subject, even in I think, Deanne, I would be curious what your thoughts are on this. Even in the photojournalism world, in the verite world, just letting your subject know what you're trying to accomplish. In the commercial world, it's critical. And your crew, it's equally important that they really understand the objective. Right. And we have long conversations about how we're going to get there. If I can say one more thing, Mike, one thing that I love about video and it goes to the communicating to the team, it's most of the time it's not a solo activity. I think, Deanne, you're the outlier as a verite shooter. And it was something that I really fell in love with video. Is for 20 years of my career, it was me alone on a plane going to hang out with athletes or shoot something. And in video, it's, in my world, it's more often than not, it's at least me and one other person, or me and 8 other people. And I loved that camaraderie. It's a team. It's really a team in the video world, at least in my world.
Deanne, definitely take it to your world now, which could be more isolated. We talked about this. You're a one-woman, show, and how that all comes together for you. And then when you do that, I want you to also, because Chris mentioned the whole creative part, and he stands strong on his creative. Corey, I can't imagine that as a creative person, you have to deal with somebody who's an executive of a company going to come back and say, that idea sucks. Let's move on. But Deanne, talk a little bit about your world, though, because it's far different from what these guys are doing.
Exactly. My work is about intimacy, and it's about connecting with the person that I'm photographing and then having them forget about me so that I can walk into the bedroom when they're waking up in the morning. And if I were a crew, that would be really hard to do. But a lot of times it's just me. I might have one other person with me, but I just would text down to his room and say, hey, you mind if I stop by?
Right.
You guys awake? And it would be really hard to do that as a crew. So I'm able to go in there and just capture these moments that I think are revealing. It's that intimacy. I think that, as a crew, there's, how would I be able to do that?
Yeah, probably not. I mean, and I actually think in Deanne describing that, shooting her subject waking up, filming them waking up in the morning, I think in many videos, many projects, it's a hybrid of different techniques. And so there are certainly projects where it makes sense to have orchestrated elements, where you need more of a team and it's choreographed, it's orchestrated, yet then there are moments that without professional actors, the only way you're getting that is in that verite style. And Deanne has that amazing ability to blend in and make people feel comfortable. And you're right, a crew can't do that.
Mm-hmm. The other thing that makes this style work is the small form factor of a camera.
We're going to get to that. We'll talk a little bit about technology and how that's changed your world. We are a technology show.
Yeah, so it's just being able to blend in and not be intimidating when I come in with a lot of equipment. And
I want everybody to understand too, because we have these conversations. Not every story works out, right? I mean, you were led to this, story about music after looking into another story. What happens, and how does it break down, and then how do you pick that back up?
Well, yeah, when I I had one other story I was going towards. It fell apart at the last minute, and those things happen.
Right.
And the way this story came about, it's really just serendipity. It's just about living my life, and these stories appear in front of me, and I just follow them. This one was, I have a friend that knew this band, and she had said, hey, this band I know, they're going to be playing in town. You want to go see them? I said, I can't go. I'm out of town. But my husband went. And, I call him up later and I say, it's like, I said, I'm kind of freaking out because my story fell through. How was the concert? And he said, you're not going to believe it. This band is so good, bluesy, soulful, and it's a family. And he goes, you might want to think about them. And I said, okay, tell me more about this band. He says, well, to tell you the truth, I brought them home, and they're all staying here at the house right now.
Surprise.
So, it's just one of these things that evolves. So I just, reached out, and I said, hey, can I come on the road with you?
So, Corey, I know we're on a live broadcast, and your clients are probably tuning in. Who is the worst client that you've ever had to deal with that you went out with the greatest idea, not that I'm putting you on the spot or anything like that, and you just wanted to say, maybe just said to yourself, that is the dumbest thing I have ever heard. They're going in the wrong direction. It's going to screw up their campaign. And you don't have to specify anybody, but how often does that happen?
No, to be honest, I feel, and I pinch myself a little bit because I feel like if you spend enough time in that pre-production process, and look, people listen. We're humans. We just sometimes the way information gets presented, it has to be presented in different ways for different people. And I have this philosophy, which I'll spend as much time as necessary on the front end to try to talk through the logistics and what it means and what is the impact of how we're planning to shoot this. And I really try to resolve in a constructive way those conversations up front.
Right.
Because by the time we get into the field, the burn rate when you get into the field and you have a big crew, and I say big, that could be 3 people, it could be 30 people. As the clock ticks, it's like, $20 and $100 bills are flying through the fan at the same time. And so you have to resolve this stuff in advance. And I really pride myself, and I think I'm a good listener, and I think I'm good at communicating and explaining what we're trying to make sure that we're I'm seeing what they want to accomplish, and I'm explaining my idea. And I think in a great collaboration, they might start here, and I might kind of start over here, but as we get closer and we talk about the idea, I mean, are there moments in the field where someone makes a judgment call that I think is wrong? Sure, but that's also part of being a professional. You roll with it. I've learned how to kind of roll with what I think might be a bad decision, and then we go back and shoot what I think is the right way to do it, and frankly, figure it out in post-production.
Right.
It's and I'm also the first to admit I try to really leave my ego at check when we're both in pre-production, in production, and in post-production. Because guess what? We work with a lot of really smart people, and sometimes their ideas, they're just flat out better than mine. And what my solution is, they throw something out, and I try to, keeping that open mind is really important. And I think particularly in the commercial advertising world, it's, there's many ways to get to the same place. And so, I know that was a roundabout answer.
No, I understand.
But I really feel that way.
And
I'm going to really, it's very rare that I end up in the field where I totally disagree with what we're shooting, because we put a lot of legwork in before we get there.
So I'm going to definitely shift gears. I'm going to come back to you, Deanne, because you mentioned something, form factor. So listen, we have salespeople and tech people on the floor to sell. I need the genuine answers to what about, as we moved into mirrorless, form factor is something. Take form factor and run with that as to what is helping you as a journalist in the new technologies, and I want each of you to address that. And we'll go from you to Chris and then back to Corey. But
yeah, well, I didn't even know if I would want to be a mirrorless photographer. I've always used DSLRs. And so, when I first picked this up, I couldn't believe how light it was and how good it felt in my hand.
And you mean the Z7?
The Z7,
right.
Yep. And so, it's really about trying to become invisible, and this helps me, but also not carrying a lot of gear.
Right.
It's an easy camera to work with for video. It's making my video shooting so much more streamlined and easy. The autofocus is incredible.
Speak to that in video and autofocus, because autofocus in video was not really the thing to do, right? Wide-angle lens, f8, and everything's in focus. Talk a little bit about the improvements in autofocus in the Z series and how that's helped you.
Yeah, well, I'm looking for a cinematic look, so I'm usually not shooting on f8, so I mean, that's the great thing that we're able to do now, is to get that cinematic look. I also want to mention audio for a second, because a lot of people are curious. It's like, okay, how do you handle the audio on this? And it makes a lot of sense to have external audio. So, so basically, I had a hot shoe mic, a shotgun mic, that I was using to pick up. It's really as a backup for me. It's redundant, but it's also capturing ambient sound and natural sound. In addition to that, on Ron, I had a lavalier mic for most of it.
Music is so important. The quality of the music has to be great, right?
Yeah, and I was able to plug into the soundboard at times as well. So the audio is really important. I think it's something that everyone really needs to think about to take the production level up, even if you are working as a one-man band, one-woman show.
Sure. Hey, Chris, again, we tasked you to do a music video with Z. What were some of the things that stood out right away as you were fresh in mirrorless?
Yeah, let me piggyback off of the autofocus.
The tracking capability.
Yeah, on a shoot as large as what we did, you would typically have, the lens hooked up to a follow focus and maybe someone, monitoring that the entire time and operating that. I think the shock that happened to us, because we didn't know what to expect from this camera when we first picked it up, was that the autofocus was awesome. And we ended up using it on a shoot that we had someone dedicated to pull focus, and we decided that we don't need it. And if we can, if we can't move forward without having to do some of those more technical things for video and we can rely on in-camera features, then that saves us more time to shoot more. All I want to do is shoot more. I don't want to get hung up in details and technical aspects too much. I want to focus on them. I want to pay attention to what needs to be said. I don't want to throw the camera in auto. But, for the most recent shoot that I did, I used autofocus and I loved it. And I'm personally trying to move more into documentary work. And so I love to travel. I love to road trip and do all kinds of adventure stuff. And so sometimes I've just got my camera with me, and it's not a production. It's something for me.
Talk about how important, because you have people in your photos, the facial recognition in the autofocus, how that worked, and identifying the subject and sticking with the subject. That's the key here, right?
Yeah, it's great for photo and video. The autofocus and the low light capabilities, but for me, Nikon's just started developing all these features for filmmakers. And the Nikon Z6 has had it has so many features that I've been really wanting, and it's there and it works great, which is awesome.
What else outside of the autofocus?
Focus peaking is huge. Right. So I love variety. So for me, I don't want to work on a project too long, so I don't want to stay in post-editing too long. I want to move on from project to project. And I also don't want every project to look the same. So for me, I was really excited to shoot older vintage, prime lenses, and I haven't been able to shoot them as accurately with a DSLR because it's very hard to manually focus, especially in low light.
Manual focusing, right.
So with the Nikon Z6 and Z7, I have focus peaking, and I can operate a manual prime lens in very dark conditions and pull off a perfect in focus shot.
Right.
So whether I want, sometimes I don't have time to hassle with that. The other day I was doing the shoot, and I wanted to be all fancy and use those lenses, and then I was like, no, I need the quickest, sharpest, fastest lens, and I threw on the 35-1.8 for the Z series, or is it S series? S line.
It's S. It's
S line.
Z Nikkor.
Yeah, Z Nikkor. Yeah. And that thing was sharp as a tack and found the focus in near dark conditions. So a variety. That's what I love about the technical side of what the Z system allows me to do, is shoot everything that I do and come at it with a different approach every time I pick up a camera.
Corey, we've spoken before about stability within video, and there are a lot of different rigs that you can buy to put on as attachments and accessories to the camera. What is it about the Z series that attracted you to the whole stabilization part of this, and is that important to you, and has it worked for you?
Sure. I mean, I was surprised, the first time you touch a camera, and especially a prototype camera, we were working with cameras that weren't released yet, and so it doesn't come with a 200-page manual with descriptions of every feature. So there's a little bit of kind of surfing through menus and kind of identifying what the camera is doing. And one of the things I sort of realized immediately when shooting with the Z7 is I was hand-holding the camera shooting video, but the footage looked far more stable than I was accustomed to seeing on the D850, for example. And later, I discovered that the sensor is actually stabilized. It's actually stabilizing the sensor. It's as though there's a gimbal built into your camera. And this is, I think, in Deanne's world, and all three of us, we find ourselves, we just love shooting. And so at my house constantly, or even on the project I shot on mountain biking to help launch the Z7, there's a lot of handheld footage in there, and it taking that edge off of the kind of shake in a very beautiful way. And you have the ability, of course, to turn it on, turn the stabilization on, or lock the sensor so that it's not floating within the camera. But that's an amazing feature. It's not cropping a digital file and doing it electronically. It's physically the sensor is being stabilized in the camera. I mean, the other, I have to say, technological piece of the Z system that has really changed my world, and I think I can vouch for all of us, is an electronic viewfinder. Just
explain that. How has it changed?
So with a DSLR camera, you're looking, it's a through the lens reflex camera. You're looking through an optic with some mirrors, and then you're seeing through your actual lens, and every time you depress the shutter, a mirror flips up, and that's why it blacks out. And with a mirrorless camera, as it implies, there's no mirror that's flipping up every time you take a picture. And so there's an electronic viewfinder, which is, it's a little screen, really high resolution, super sharp screen that you put your eye into. And there's never, in video, it means, and this is the big breakthrough, it means in bright sunlight or when you're struggling to kind of check focus, you're not looking at the back of a camera screen, the LCD. Right. You're actually looking into an eyepiece, much more like a traditional cinema camera, whether you were shooting film or whether you were shooting video. And this is just game-changing for shooting video. It means your eye can be up to that view. You can be checking focus, recording, changing exposure. You can do playback without ever taking your eye off of the camera. And so it allows you to really, no matter what the lighting conditions, you can be sort of glued to that camera and actually shooting. Right. You know, likewise, the articulating screen is, you know, and that has been in a few of the Nikon DSLR cameras, but that combination of articulating LCD screen on the back of the camera and the electronic viewfinder, that combination, it's really tuned now for video.
Deanne, and take us home here, because this went so fast, but how does that help you as a journalist, you know, having the electronic viewfinder and the VR built in? I mean, it's 5 stops of VR, which is pretty phenomenal. I guess that helps you as a single one-woman band.
Absolutely. It gives me confidence that I can go out there and work by myself and get some decent video. You know, I can really tell a story. One last thing I want to say about story structure, that for people that are going out trying to create stories, to really, even though I'm one-man band, I'm kind of, you know, letting the story evolve, I'm still thinking about the structure of the story, thinking about setup, introduction, thinking about the conflict or the arc and the resolution to that. For example, I do have a longer version of this. I have it on Instagram with the link in my Instagram profile. But there you can see there's a conflict in the middle. They're having a problem trying to deal with a money issue.
Right, right. And so their handles are up there now. Please follow these amazing artists. I was so worried that we wouldn't have enough to talk about, and we just don't have enough time, but this conversation can go on for hours. I can't thank you guys enough for giving us the time here and sharing your insights with these people. Please follow their work. We have another amazing artist, photographer coming up. Her name is Jen Rosenbaum. Thank you guys for your time. We're going to make a quick transition of the stage, and we're going to keep the education going. So thank you guys.
Thank you.
Awesome.